Hello, and thanks so much for joining Exhale into Life with Regina. I am so happy to have you with me. I am your host, Regina C. Hall, and you are live streaming with us from WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And please comment and please share. We want to make sure that everyone is having an opportunity to view Exhale into Life with Regina. Today, I have a special guest with me, and I'm going to be introducing him soon. And we're going to be talking about caregiving, as well as his faith, legacy, and other things amongst caregiving that he has done. But I wanted to share with you some really astonishing statistics. And these statistics, I have to admit, are just really, for me, overwhelming. As a person who have been a caregiver in my life before, to learn that there are now around 100 million adult caregivers in the United States, acting as caregivers, significantly down, up from 43.5 million in 2015. That is a large increase. Also, 53 million are caring for spouses, parents, elderly relatives, and children with special needs. That's up from 43.5 million a few years ago. The number of people providing regular care to older adults rose from 18.2 million in 2011 to 24.1 million in 2022. That is a 32% increase, and the numbers are continuing to rise. That just really shares there's a lot of sick people in this world, or a lot of people need care in this world. And when so many cuts are going on, I have to admit, this is not looking good. When you think about all the cuts that's going on or are to happen, and how that's going to impact a lot of caregivers and also the person who's being cared for. This is not really looking great. However, our faith can tell us different. How about that? And so I do want to mention though, because oftentimes you think about, as your parents get older, and you think about you getting older, probably in your 40s or 50s or 60s, maybe you will be taking care of a loved one. But in all honesty, millennials are rising caregivers. How about that? It's stated that millennials now make up about 25% of all caregivers in the United States. 25%. Who could imagine that? And so when you go really thinking about that, I want us to really focus on the fact that we have now millennials. I think they're just like in their mid 40s, 25% caring. I believe I was in my 40s when my dad, he was in the hospital, and actually he was talking with me on the phone, and he said that he had this awful headache. And I asked him, what were they doing about it? And he said, well, the nurse had just left to get him some medication for it. And as we were continuing to speak, my dad, I heard this gurgling sound coming across the phone. And as I heard this sound coming across the phone, I just started screaming for my dad's name, because I couldn't hear him anymore other than the gurgling. He wasn't saying anything to me, and this was very scary. From what I understand, his roommate who witnessed what my dad was going through, was able to buzz the nurses in. They were able to try to revive my father, but he lost so much oxygen that for 7 months, my dad stayed in a coma. But what was amazing about my dad, I have to admit, that he stayed on oxygen only for a few days because he was in such good shape. They said to us that the majority of the time that my dad was in a coma, he was just on a trach. He was never put back on oxygen ever again, which was amazing because to me, this man was going to eventually get up and walk. It did not happen, but I can honestly say running to the hospital early, making sure that they were taking care of my dad, trying to make sure that they didn't allow him to get any bed sores because they had allowed that to happen. That they were still moving his body, that he just wasn't a man who was laying in that bed, that was my dad, and you were going to see after him until his last breath. I was trying to make sure. And honestly, if I could have rode around with my dad in the car with me in that condition, I would have done it because that's how much I care for my father. So I have a guest that's coming on today who had a passion and love for his father, along with other family members. And I want to introduce him to my viewers. And I want you to know that his sister is the one who's a good friend of mine, Barbara Gentry Pugh, who recommended her brother come on and do this interview with me. So my guest today is Reverend Michael Gentry. Uh, Michael Gentry has worn many hats: nurse, husband, father, grandfather, ordained minister, corporate professional, worship leader. And also, you have just recently retired from University of Finlay, right? That's Finlay.
That's right.
Okay, as a director of buildings and grounds. And so you have worn many, many hats. But I must tell my audience that the greatest hat that you have worn is being married to your wife for almost 50 years
Hmm.
uh, in 1976, and when you guys married. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. That is beautiful. So welcome, Reverend Michael Gentry, to
Thank you.
Exhale
Thank you so much for having me.
into Life with Regina. Yes, yes, yes. Well, let's get started and talk about
Okay.
your personal journey first. So, in reading your bio, you said that you really began your foundation in your faith at the age of 13, that
Hmm.
you received Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and that was a significant moment in your life. So, tell us how your faith has shaped the way you approach care, service, and family.
I guess one of the things that is probably more touching than anything else that I can think of is the love for people. I'm a people
Okay.
person. And upon coming to Christ, I know that just the idea that so many people have so many issues in the world right now, and just being able to help and be just an encouraging person or someone that just can give them a helping hand is something that I've really enjoyed doing my entire life. And so that passion for people is something that I believe that the Spirit of God uh, gifted me with. And my spiritual gift is that of teaching and administration. So that's my spiritual gift. Many years ago, I thought I would be a pastor, but that door never opened fully for me. And I can see why now. I've done so many things. The Lord just continues to open doors, even at my late age in life. There's just been so many great things going on. So that's foundational for me, is to
That
have Christ. Hmm.
and it's really wonderful to hear you say that you thought that door was going to open for you as a preacher, because
Hmm.
that's what we normally think about, right?
That's right.
That we're going to preach the word, and
Hmm.
but it opened for administration as well as teaching, and that
Hmm.
door has continued to open for you. And it seems like just outside the church. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was able to do is I was the interim president at Crossroads Bible Church there in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I was able to do some things that is just amazing how God opens doors and allows you to do the various things. And so I was able to do that. And during that time, we took two schools and merged them into one. And so I'm serving on the board of trustees for College of Biblical Studies.
Okay.
So yes, outside the church, I'm doing many things.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful.
Hmm.
And, that's a good word too for others who are seeking ministry. And if a door is not opening the door that they think God's going to take them down, then, we can wait for God to open up that door. I never wanted to because I am also ordained. I just,
Hmm.
I never, so I didn't mind preaching and teaching the word
Hmm.
but I never wanted to be pastor.
Hmm.
But I have to admit, I am a counselor. And so you
Hmm.
hear a lot. I just didn't want to, in my mind, as a pastor, I believe that they are just flooded so often with many problems, many concerns, and they're dealing with so much. And it's just can be such a heavy burden. My hat really goes
Hmm.
off to pastors. And even thinking about that, but it being a counselor, I take on a
Hmm.
lot of people, coming and sharing about what's going on in their lives. But you begin to see that God moves in so much in the healing, just being able
Hmm.
to heal in various areas. And so I can only imagine how your teaching and your administration has also provided healing for others.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Well, now you say that you've been married since 1976, which is
Yes.
incredible, really. It's really my hat goes off with, we have these percentages now where
Hmm.
50% of marriages, first marriages, end in divorce. And if they get married a second time, it's 75% of
That's
marriages
right.
end in divorce. So, those
Hmm.
are extremely high numbers. And so, your role as a husband in your relationship with your wife, how
Hmm.
has that played out in your caregiving season?
Well, that's it's really interesting. My wife, by the way, is my high school sweetheart.
Oh,
And
wow.
so uh, I haven't dated another person since probably 1973.
Wow.
So we've been together a long time. But one thing I
Yeah.
will say about her, my wife, Angie, is she gives me that space. She has been an encouragement to me all these years. In fact, even right now, I've retired a total of 4 times, and
Okay.
yeah, so I've retired, and it seems like the Lord opens up another door for me to do other things. And she has been very just excellent as far as encouraging me to, it's the right thing to do. She's that voice that kind of helps me to stay anchored in many things. In fact, while I was taking care of my dad, myself and Barbara were flying down to Texas and spending weeks taking care of my dad down there. She was an encourager, and she stood right by me. Hey, you stay as long as you need. Take care of things. I've got everything here at the house. So yeah, she's been an encourager. She's been just a person who is always had a good attitude about things too. So I just praise the Lord that He brought her my way.
Amen. And you recognize that the Lord brought her your way at such a young age.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We both came to Christ. Well, my wife came to Christ when she was about 19, and we
Okay.
both rededicated our lives. I think it was at age 21 and 23, and we have lived for the Lord this entire time. And just as a quick side note, when we lived in Nebraska, one of the things that I did was I was a circuit riding preacher. And many of the churches that did not have a pastor, we would one Sunday I would be a Berean, the next Sunday I would be Baptist, the next Sunday I would be something else. And so she would play a violin, the kids would sing, and I would preach. And
Wow.
we did that for probably 10 years, and it was a great time. It really was almost missionary, so to speak.
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. And I hear about churches not having a pastor, but I've never really heard about people going around or a pastor going around preaching
Mhm.
at various churches.
Well, so many of the churches that we went to in the smaller communities, yeah, I don't know if you,
Mhm.
some of the statistics about church and church closings is alarming. So many churches are closing in the small rural communities because there's no pastor there to 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 be a shepherd over just a handful of people. And so
Yeah.
many of the things that we did was there was times that we went and we spoke to 4 or 5 people. Is that was the congregation, but it was a church, and they still functioned. So I was able to come in and be there for 1 or 2 Sundays and rotate around to someone else would take care of things.
Oh,
So
okay.
mhm,
All right. Well,
pretty
when I
moderated.
was in college, it's certain like we would rotate the pastors. I went to Central
Hmm.
Michigan University, and we had a choir, and there
Yeah.
were some of us who would congregate, and we
Hmm.
would have pastors just rotating coming in
Sure.
to preach to us. So, all right, well, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, so you also have had a career in Marathon Oil as well?
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, and so you served in a ministry and adopted your grandson.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Yes,
So
yes.
that
Go
was
ahead,
a
tell us
life.
about that.
Well, the position with Marathon, I was a nurse first. I graduated from nursing school and I was working as a nurse, and then decided to take a different position, and I went into the oil industry. And so I did that for a while, and then I was moved to the corporate headquarters. But all that time that was taking place, I was licensed, I was ordained. I served as a youth pastor for a small amount of time, and then I did some bivocational work.
Okay.
So I did that throughout the time that I was with Marathon. And so when I ended the career with Marathon, I went to work for Kiefner Engineering out of Columbus, Ohio. And it was during that time that our daughter wasn't able to take care of our son. So we took care of him and ultimately ended up adopting him. And so
Wow.
I always tell people that I have a 47-year-old, a 45-year-old, and a 21-year-old.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
so it actually kept us young. It really did. Um,
I can
so,
imagine that your
mhm.
grandson kept you young and
Oh,
he calls you father. Would that be correct? Because you
yeah.
adopted him. So, what is your name?
My name is Dad. He
Your
called
name is Dad.
me
All
Dad. Mhm.
right.
And the two grandkids call me Paw Paw.
Okay. All right. And how old are your grandchildren?
The grandchildren are 17 and 15. I've got a
Okay. So,
17-year-old girl, Raya, and a
okay.
15-year-old boy. His name is Michael, after my son, Michael.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then you have a son that's 21-year-old.
Yes, that's
Yes. And then
Lucas.
your older son, and you have an older daughter.
That's right. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So that is definitely a lot going on, right?
Yeah,
During that time when you were
absolutely.
at Marathon,
Hmm.
in the ministry, decided to adopt at that time. You're
Hmm.
dead now, and that is also a caregiving role
Sure.
that you
Yeah,
took on. Yeah. So
absolutely.
it seemed like, would you say that being a father and then transitioning to being a father to your grandson really helped grounded you, or really helped to prepare you for what you were going to end up doing later?
There is. I would agree with that 100%. There is an old saying. It's an idiom that someone came up with many years ago. Uh, Twice a child, once a man. That as you come into this world, you're needed to be cared for and taken and given all the help and guidance as you go along to grow you to be that man. And then if you live long enough, there's going to be that time that someone's going to have to care and take care of you as you've gotten older. And so I've been able to see that firsthand with my children. My dad is where he ended up to where we had to take care of him, and almost with respect speak with him as if he were a young child in many instances. And so
Hmm.
that was one of those things that was kind of painful, because in reflection about myself, I can see that if the Lord wills and I live that long, I kind of hope Jesus comes back first. But if he
I know.
doesn't come back, then I'm gonna see that time in my life to where I'm gonna need someone to care for me and to fix my food and to serve my food and to help bathe me and help dress me. And that cycle is going to continue.
Yeah. Yeah, you're so right, but I have seen some 90-year-olds and 80-year-olds that are out there. I mean, my
Oh
husband
yeah.
plays tennis. They're out there with him. They're out there playing tennis. And I'm like, that right there, that's what I'm looking for right there. But
Hmm.
in terms of the twice a child and once an adult, I can really relate to that because as my mother, because like I said, my dad was in a coma, but as
Hmm.
my mommy aged, it was I began to see that, it's like, okay, wait, you
Yeah.
my mom, wait, I'm looking for you to guide me. And
Mm.
my brother and my sister really were instrumental in her care. For me, I took on so much of my father's, and by then I had my daughter. I felt like, you guys do that. You guys do that. And they did an excellent job.
Sure.
But I would help, but I would still think, wow, mama,
Hmm.
I really didn't see that. So you're right, it's very difficult. But my mom was very feisty too, because she would be like,
Hmm.
oh hell, get out my face with that. Or she was really feisty. So I mean, she let you know that she was mom.
Sure.
And so I can imagine with your
Hmm.
dad, even though seeing, your dad, of you having to take on that role, uh,
Hmm.
that he still understood that he was your dad.
Sure. Yeah.
So how
You
was
know,
that in the interaction sometimes for you?
it has to do with respect and honor. Just the fact that respect is the act of giving a particular amount of attention to someone that maybe it's guidance, maybe it could be it could be other things, but I think that the respect that I had for my father
Uh-huh.
as a father, and then being a father and grandfather, there was a lot of emotions, and I could see how the dynamics were all intertwined. That I'm a grandfather, my dad is a great grandfather, and I'm having to take care of him as if he's a younger person. It was really it was really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
to say the least. Now, I come from a very small family of nine,
Now
and
you say small family of 9. Are you talking about siblings?
nine brothers and sisters. Yeah.
Yeah, that seemed kind of big to me, but go ahead.
So you figure more than anything else, I think the one thing that helped my dad and myself, along with my other siblings, was that I knew that myself and my dad had a really intimate relationship with Jesus Christ.
Okay,
And,
yes.
and because of that, with that genuine relationship, the trust, the respect, the love and affection and support and communications was all in sync, so to speak. And so being able to look at that and embrace it and see and have an understanding that I knew what he meant and I knew what he was thinking, but he couldn't maybe quite do it or maybe couldn't quite enunciate it the way he should, um, made me a little bit more tender toward him and understanding and more giving.
That's wonderful.
Hmm.
That
So
is
that so
wonderful.
that was a very passionate thing My dad, I call my dad Reverend O.W. Gentry, and over the years, that was just something that I just did. I, Hello, Reverend O.W. Gentry, how are you? And we would just, I'd call him once a week, and we would talk, and then it went from Reverend O.W. Gentry to just the latter years of his life was O.W. And we would sit and talk and just enjoy ourselves, and had a great time. But real quickly, my dad and my grandmother, my uncles on my father's side of the family all had long genes. My grandmother was going to be 99 when she passed
Wow.
away. My uncle was 98 when he passed away. The uncle before him was 97. My dad was 98. So we've got some long genes on that side, on my father's side of the family.
Yeah.
So you can almost see how things are setting up for those statistics that you talked about as far as the caregivers that are taking care of family from 53,000 to 43,000, I believe that you said.
Yeah,
Uh,
well now it's up to 100. It's 100 million
oh,
now are being taken care of in the US. Adults, 100 million
yeah.
adults now are caregiving.
And I can see that number will probably grow more until that generation probably passes on. And then the numbers could go back. They're
Yeah.
going to fluctuate, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's something you would say that you guys have that gene of longevity.
Hmm.
I know from my family, it is, it's random.
Mm.
You see some living a life of longevity, and then you see some that are not
Yeah.
living that life of longevity. And
Hmm.
uh, so you just never know. But there
Sure.
used to be a time uh, where they would offer like this long-term care on your jobs.
Hmm.
But they have taken that away because it started to get too expensive.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it too expensive, and years ago, uh, people were taken care of at home, and assisted living, nursing homes, places like that were not as prevalent as they are today.
That's true.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what are some of the barriers? Because with your dad,
Hmm.
watching him needing more and more care throughout the years, because I believe what I read, and you could correct me, that it was
Hmm.
like 2 decades of you and your siblings taking care of your dad. Would
Hmm.
that be right?
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead. And then you traveled for those 2 decades. Like, how was that, and what was some of the barriers?
So, so one of the things that we did is that we separated who did what. I was a financial guy, and I'm the
Okay.
one that from around 2001 I began to take care of all the financial matters. And so I was able to do that. Barbara was more the giving my sister Judy the medical side of everything. My brother Dennis was a person. He was a former football player with the Chicago Bears. He had the things as far as making sure my dad had a place to be and stay, and there was someone to take care of him. So we set everything up so that everyone was responsible for a certain thing.
That was wise. That was really, really
Mhm.
smart.
So and so the boundaries that needed to be set was Michael has finances. Everyone else stay away. Barbara has the ultimate say on the medical. Everyone else stay away. And we had to really discipline ourselves to stay within those boundaries. And that was probably the biggest issue more than anything else
I
was.
can imagine. I
Mhm.
can imagine. Just even thinking about the dynamics in my family and what we
Mhm.
went through. And but to know that you guys were laying that out was
Yeah.
great.
Mhm.
And so, but you found that as the biggest barrier. I'm
Mhm.
imagining then that caring for your father or your other brother, making sure that he had that place.
Hmm.
Um, did you guys meet on a regular basis to come together to talk about your dad's care? And at this point, where's your mom?
Well, oh, now my mom passed away. Let's see here. My mom passed away 58 years ago. So you can
Wow.
imagine my mom passed away when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
And my dad tried a marriage, but just with so many kids, it just didn't work out. So he raised us all by himself. And so each one of us kind of has our own identity.
Yes.
And it made it interesting sometimes, when we all came together and we tried to be on a call. And thank goodness for Zoom. When Zoom came along and that reality, virtual TV kind of came along, that really made things nice in terms of we could see each other and read body language, understand what is going on. And so we at least had a chance to talk about it. We didn't
Okay.
always agree, unfortunately, but that, I mean, that's life. That's always
Yes.
going to be that way. But but we were able to, through all our own shared experiences, offer as a suggestion. I would say we should do this, and someone else, because of their shared experiences, could say, "Well, I see it this way." So we had we had layers of experience and ideas that we could choose from. So that made it really good.
Well, that's great. And because I was just even thinking, you a nurse,
Hmm.
Barbara a nurse.
Hmm.
Did you guys come together sometimes, even though you were finance, because you both had that medical background? Or and was it difficult for you just to leave it in Barbara's hand because you did have that background?
Well, what we did is we talked it through until we finally either agreed to disagree.
Okay, all right.
And because of what she knew and her expertise, it was a lot easier for them to ask us, well, what do you guys think? And
Yes.
we would offer an opinion. And sometimes everyone took it graciously. Other times it wasn't a gracious acceptance. It was like, well,
Yeah.
I disagree. And we just had to, okay, well, we still got to move on. And so
Yeah.
I saw the disagreements come to be more and more as my dad's Alzheimer's and a little bit of dementia was coming in, and how everyone said, well, if we just do this, he'll be okay. If we just do this, he'll be okay. Well, it didn't always work that way because, um, I think if we just do this way and make sure he eats this, he's going to be fine. It'll be okay. And we call
Mm,
those guys the ones that put their head in the sand. He's going to be okay as long as we keep taking care of things for him.
yeah.
And so we disagreed a lot of times
Yeah,
later
I
on.
can imagine,
Sure.
like you said, everyone having their own personality, seeing
Hmm.
life from their own perspectives, and really bringing that together. It really had to be tough.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
imagining,
Hmm.
and you're right. And as dementia set in, um, more and more you
Hmm.
see the child acting, or the childlike come about,
Yeah.
which is also devastating to
Hmm.
watch. To me, it's such a slow death, and somewhat painful, because I worked on the memory unit, and it was very painful to watch at times.
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah.
And it's a time consuming thing also to, it doesn't sound like it, but to have someone ask the same question at least 10 or 12 times a day and you keep giving the same answer, and once you finish you get up and you walk away and you come back and ask them if they need a drink of water and they ask the same question again.
Yeah.
Those are the things that for for just the human mind is kind of like, we just went through this. What's
Yeah.
going on? You know, and that was the hard part,
Yeah.
because my dad would find himself saying something to me, and he may say something just the opposite to another brother, and something else to another sister. And boy, no, he said this. No, he said this. And you really had to respect each other and think about it on an adult level. You really did.
Yes, yes. And I'm sure that it had its funny moments too. Working on the memory unit,
Hmm.
I recall that I had a patient. Just he had, I mean, he was coming up. They were bringing him onto the unit, Michael. Literally
Hmm.
bringing him onto the unit, and I met him with the hi. You know, I was
Hmm.
like hi. He jumped out of that wheelchair and chase me around that area. I had to grab the wheelchair. I was running. I was like, oh my God. They finally, because the person who brought him, she wasn't trying to restrain him or anything. They
Hmm.
had, and then they heard me saying, someone come and get him. I'm running around the wheelchair. But he has such great energy. Okay.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
end up taking him to the hospital that night. And do you know, I'm thinking, oh, he's probably going to be coming back. That man passed away.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was coming. I mean, and so sometimes you saw that they would come on the memory unit and they would stay, and I would try. I would have to be the one trying to
Hmm.
find them a place, and then sometimes they would come, and I don't know that they say, "No, this ain't gonna be for me," and they would go on.
Yeah.
So it
Hmm.
just, but that was one of those. I'm sorry he died, of course, but it was a funny moment that this man had that much energy. And I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for dementia. I'm looking
Sure.
for him to be
Sure.
in the wheelchair, and he jumps out that wheelchair and chases me around. That I wasn't expecting. And so sometimes it did get a little comical on that unit, I
Oh
have to
yeah.
admit,
Absolutely.
amongst many other stories. But what did you discover about yourself as you journey through this time of dementia with your dad, and sharing in this moment with your siblings? Because when I understand from
Hmm.
Barbara, all of you are still living. Is that right?
Yes, we are. Yes, we are.
Wow.
You know, the one scripture that would always come to mind is, what so a man soweth, that shall he also reap.
Yes.
And I, just the whole idea of watching my dad and seeing him, in my mind, I always said, Lord, don't let me mock anything or be disrespectful to my father at this time in his life, but
Yeah.
keep me sober and cautious in how I think and how I treat him, because I'm about 30 years behind him from where he was to where I am now. And a lot can happen in 30 years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So that for me, I just wanted to make sure that I was not guilty of something or putting myself up to where I would have to reap. Um, I wanted to be patient. I wanted to be kind. I wanted to help him. I tried my best to not get frustrated with my dad ever. Just let it go. Just take a deep breath.
Yes, yes. I can imagine a lot of
Hmm.
exhaling went on, in
Hmm.
caring, because you're right, it's not easy to do.
Hmm. Oh,
And I can only imagine what that must have been like for you and your family, and watching the deterioration of a
hmm.
strong man, and even yourself. We live in a society uh that expects you as a man to be strong,
Hmm.
and not have that vulnerability. Strong men don't cry.
Hmm.
And I'm even wondering, even being a Black man, how did that play out for you? And needing to be strong,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe you didn't buy into that at all. So what was that like for you, Michael, in just, trying to, like you said, take a breath?
Mm-hmm. You know, when I think about that, my dad was so strong, and I think actually I gained strength from him, watching him endure what he was enduring.
Okay.
um, it was like, wow, what a deal. And I see how he would manage it, even in his frail moments. It was like, wow, I hope I can have that same mindset when I'm that age, or if I'm ever in that situation. So it was more being in awe of his strength and being respectful of who he was as a father, and then seeing his strength, and then those times when he didn't have strength, that you had to be the strength for him. So I kind of blocked everything else out, and I focused on him. And my wife also kind of keeps me straight there too.
Yeah, that's right. Which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And so she was my sounding board. So I could call and say, I'm dealing with this, I'm dealing with this. And she would listen, and she wouldn't give me a whole list of things to go do, but just to listen and say, well, that's right. And to do the right thing. So I'll be praying for you, and I'll talk with you tomorrow night. And, so I didn't really dwell on strength. I didn't dwell on any of those things. I watched him, and I was cognizant of, I'm going to be there someday too, Lord willing. And so that's how I kept myself balanced, so to
That's
speak.
a wonderful scripture to
Hmm.
follow. I really, as of late, I've been hearing that more and more in my
Hmm.
spirit too. I think that's something that we, as people, need to understand, that you will reap what you sow.
Oh my
You
goodness.
and it's a lot going on in the earth, and being respectful to
Hmm.
your dad in that time, because a lot of elderly abuse happens, unfortunately. um, and
Yeah.
I didn't read any of those numbers, but those numbers are painfully high. um,
When it came to the time that we were going to have my dad be in assisted living, we had to move him to an assisted living place, because my brother Dennis would keep my dad for a month. Barbara would fly down and take care of him for a month. I would fly down and take care of him for weeks on end. And so we were
mhm.
burning ourselves out.
Yes.
And it finally came to the point to where it was like, we're going to have to find a place. But then when you start reading the statistics on elder abuse, and the cleanliness of facilities, the unprofessionalness at some of these places, and you just think, I can't do this. And
Mhm.
it took a lot of prayer and searching to find a good place for us to put my dad, so that we felt good about it. The one thing I will add in that is that we also, where we placed him, made sure that we came by often enough to where
Yes,
they saw that we were committed to them doing the right thing and taking care of our father.
that's right. That's very true. And I'm glad that
Mhm.
you even spoke to that, because when, of course, my dad being in a coma,
Yeah.
finally they removed him from the hospital. They needed him to leave the
Sure.
hospital,
Yeah.
and we had to
Hmm.
find a place for him as well.
Hmm.
And the place I end up finding for my dad, I based it on ratio. the amount
Mhm.
of people who can watch over him. It was a okay
Sure.
place,
Hmm.
but like you said, everybody have their own personalities, and my siblings wanted some, it had to look more fancy. But would he have gotten the care?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so it became difficult for them. But as time went on, they
Hmm.
were able to see, oh well, you know what? No, it wasn't that great of a place. I mean, we didn't really like it. Was average. It was an average looking
Hmm.
place.
Hmm.
The care, I was surprised of the high number
Yeah.
that was there. The ratio,
Mhm.
I can't remember exactly, but I do know it was a good ratio of
Sure. Hmm.
patient to care.
Yeah.
And so in you guys looking for that, you're right. And it's
Mhm.
difficult. What was some of the criterias that you guys were looking for to say this was a place where you wanted to put your loved one?
I wanted to know how many bedridden patients were there.
Okay.
I wanted to know turnover rate. How
Yes.
often are you going through employees?
Yes.
And I wanted to talk with the church nurse and the director of nursing.
That was great.
And so I had a chance to sit and talk with them. And then the one place we narrowed it down to one or two places. I had a brother in Houston that went to the place that we finally ended up deciding that's where he was going to go. And he checked everything out. And so between what I investigated, what Barbara's thought, what Harold thought, and what Margaret thought, the four of us put our heads together and say, this sounds like the place we want to put him. And
That
so,
is wonderful.
so, so we, so I, I'm not saying that we had it all together, but through trial and error, through making mistakes, we
Yes.
finally got some things right.
Yes.
And but then the other thing was the ratio between male and female. I wanted to kind of see that too. So
Okay.
I, I, I put all that together and came up with an idea that, okay, I know that he'll be here. I know what their schedules are going to be like. I know the kind of meal plan we want for him. And my dad loved to eat. He was all of
Okay.
130 pounds and ate. He'd eat all day if you let him.
Oh, wow.
He just had a healthy appetite. And so those kind of things is what we looked at. And when we would go visit, I tell you just a quick story. The one time I went to visit him, and I hadn't been there in like a month or two. And I'm sitting there, and I said, "Hey, I'll eat breakfast with you." And so we came over to a separate table, and some of the little ladies there were like, "Oscar, why are you sitting over there? What's going on here?" And we're sitting there, and this one lady walks by, and she says, "Oscar, you need to drink your coffee. It's getting cold now." I go, so the relationships that he was forming there and with the clientele that was there, they were taking care of each other. So
Yes, it
that
sounds like it.
made my heart, made me feel good about where he was.
Well, so
So,
I'm wondering, Michael, what would you say
mhm,
to those as we wrap up?
mhm,
What would you say to men, to fathers who are caregivers, to sons, to
mhm.
grandsons, to grandfathers? What would you say to them?
You know, it's going to happen either to your father, your brother, your sister, your mom. It's it's going to be a part of the cycle of life, and
Mm,
you probably need to start thinking about how that's going to evolve, and and actually start determining that, like, we had to liquidate all my dad's belongings, and we had to go ahead and do things that we couldn't all agree on, but we had to do it. So it's going to happen. You're going to have to make those hard decisions. And when you make those hard decisions, you got to make them and just live with it. Now,
Yes.
let me share this just real quickly. My dad and we had a real serious conversation, and he got all serious. He said, I want, he said, I've got four sons that are ministers, three that are pastors, and you. I said, yeah. He said, you got sisters, and they all want to sing. He said, but at my funeral, I don't want a gentry child speaking. I don't want a gentry child singing. I don't want a gentry child to do anything. You guys, I don't need all nine of you wanting a place or a venue of something to do. I want you all to just sit down. Well, can you imagine the conversation that I had with the rest of the family?
Yeah.
And I told them, look, you know, here are our father's wishes. And I've got a couple of brothers that they still wanted to do the internment and the eulogy. And I had to say no.
Yeah.
And that was it's still a soft issue,
I can imagine.
you
And
know.
so, what I'm understanding you to
Hmm.
say that it's going to be tough.
Hmm.
It's a cycle of life.
Yeah.
Find a way to come together.
Yeah.
Find a way to make peace with it. What because things are going to happen. It's not going to feel good, but you got to find that way.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful to
Hmm.
talk to you,
No, I've
uh,
enjoyed it.
Michael Gentry, and I just want to thank my viewers for being here. You have been watching Exhale into Life with Regina. And you
Yeah.
have been live streaming on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Thanks so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on our next segment. God bless you and take care.
God bless.